You cleaned the kitchen. You lit the fire. You whispered your wish. But the money still disappeared. Pause. Cut to gok. Ki ma, bep larng ler, nien vau tuung. Because if your stove is facing the wrong way, your fire might not be feeding you. It might be burning you. Last time, you cleared the space. You welcomed warmth. You brought presence back to the fire. But here's the thing about fire. It listens. It responds. But only if it's in the right place. Burning in the right direction. In Feng Shui, the stove is more than heat. It's your wealth engine. Your money magnet. But when placed wrong, it doesn't activate abundance. It burns through it. Most people never notice it, because the stove still lights, still cooks, still works. But energetically, something's off, and the signs are subtle. Money feels unstable. Opportunities fade. You work harder and receive less. In this video, we'll look at the 5 most common stove mistakes and how they silently block your prosperity. Stay with me till the end, because the last one, most people don't even know exists, and it could be the one that's been costing you the most. Let's reset your fire and reclaim your wealth flow. The stove is lit, the meal is hot, but the money still doesn't stay. In Feng Shui, the direction your fire faces decides whether it feeds you or leaves you. In many homes, the stove faces the wall. The cook has their back to the door, to the main qi entrance, to the flow. You may be nurturing, but the energy isn't, because when your fire turns its back to incoming qi, it doesn't catch abundance. It burns alone. In traditional Feng Shui, stove placement is about alignment with the home's mouth of qi, the entry point where energy enters and moves. If your stove faces away from that, you're cooking in disconnect. Energetically, this creates a push-pull effect. You bring heat, but the field resists circulation. Even in science, thermal field mapping shows that heat sources facing against airflow cause thermal eddies, whirlpools of confused movement. That confusion mirrors how wealth shows up: chaotic, scattered, hard to hold. And of course, not everyone can rebuild their kitchen. You might live in a rented space, or a home that's already built. Don't worry, you don't have to tear things down. Sometimes, just knowing the direction helps you shift your energy within it. Awareness is already an invitation, a soft one, and that's enough. I used to wonder why it felt like I was always behind. Bills on time, food on the table. But something kept feeling reversed, until one day I stood at my stove and realized I was cooking with my back to the door, to the light, to everything that was trying to enter. And somehow, my body had felt it all along. A stove that turns away abundance. The cook holds the wealth energy, but if you're not facing the flow, you miss what was meant for you. Sometimes, all it takes is a shift in direction, but reflects itself back? Asterisk, because in some kitchens, what's in front of the stove might be doubling something you never meant to invite. You stand in front of the fire. It burns steady, but something about it feels amplified or off. In Feng Shui, whatever faces the stove doesn't just reflect light, it reflects energy. Many modern kitchens have metal, glass, or mirrored surfaces right in front of the stove. Shiny tiles, polished steel, a reflective backsplash. It looks elegant, but energetically, it can create conflict. Because when fire reflects back into itself, it splits the flow. It stirs a kind of inner tension. In classical Feng Shui, the stove represents the fire of prosperity, and what's placed in front of that fire affects how the wealth energy moves. When the flame reflects directly back, it creates double fire conflict, a condition where energy loops in place instead of flowing outward. Think of it like shouting into a mirror. The sound doesn't travel. It bounces, echoes, and stays trapped. From an energy perspective, mirror surfaces near heat create feedback distortion, interference patterns in the electromagnetic field. The energy doesn't extend, it fragments. I've walked into so many kitchens, modern, pristine, designed with intention. But the moment I stand in front of the stove, there it is. Steel, glass, a perfect reflection of the flame, bouncing right back. And every time, I notice a strange quiet in those kitchens. Like the energy doesn't move forward. Like the room is watching itself. These aren't messy homes. They're stunning, but they often feel tense, like the flame is spinning inward instead of opening out. It made me wonder, how often do we build beauty that loops energy instead of releasing it? What faces the flame shapes the flow. Reflected fire creates inner conflict. Wealth needs direction, not confusion, not echoes. It's what it ignores. Asterisk. Because if you only ever use one burner, what happens to the others? Most stoves have 4, maybe 5 burners, but how many do you actually use? It seems harmless, but what you ignore stops flowing. In Feng Shui, each burner represents a direction, a potential, a stream of opportunity. Using only 1 or 2 burners again and again sends a message. I only trust these paths. The rest can stay quiet. And energy listens. It stops offering variety. It narrows your field. Each burner holds a place in the Bagua map. Some link to career, others to health, relationships, wealth. When you neglect part of the stove, you mute that part of your life. From a science angle, it's not just symbolic. Heat mapping shows that habitual use of one burner creates thermal imbalance, leading to uneven energy distribution across the room. Translation? Your space becomes lopsided. Your flow becomes limited. When we use the same burner over and over, we also stand in the same position, same angle, same posture. Over time, the body starts to mirror that repetition. Tight shoulders, one-sided energy, subtle tension on the same leg. You're not just cooking with one flame. You're anchoring your whole energy field to one narrow channel. I once watched someone cook every night for a week. Same routine, same burner, same spot to stand. By the 3rd day, I could feel the other burners fading from the room, like they weren't part of the kitchen anymore, like their silence became part of the energy. And it made me ask, what parts of my own potential have I stopped standing in? What you never light can't light your life. Ignored burners equals ignored energy fields. The kitchen doesn't just cook your food, it reflects your willingness to receive from more than one source. So tomorrow, just turn on a different burner. Even for a moment, let it light. Let it remember. You haven't forgotten it. The flame is strong. You face the right way. You even use every burner now. But something still feels unstable. Like the energy won't settle. Like it rises and vanishes. In Feng Shui, every element needs its balance. And fire, for all its power, is only useful when grounded. But many kitchens today place stoves on islands, thin bases, floating counters, raised up too high or dropped too low. Without earth to anchor it, fire becomes frantic. It scorches instead of warms. According to the 5 elements, fire creates earth, but also needs earth to stabilize. Without it, the flame expands without boundary. And on an energetic level, unstable platforms cause irregular thermal feedback, creating waves of heat that rise unevenly and break flow lines around the body. This leads to energy thinning, where the warmth rises but doesn't return. It escapes. It doesn't stay. So no matter how strong your stove's fire is, if it has no grounded base, it keeps losing the very wealth it's meant to attract. I once visited a woman who ran a small catering business from her home. She was kind, grounded, and cooked with such care that you could feel it in every dish. But when we sat down to talk, she looked at my tired eyes, soft voice, and said, "I don't understand. I'm always working. There's always fire, but I never feel secure." We walked into her kitchen. It was spotless. Every pan had its place. The stove sat on a marble slab-wide, elegant, floating in the middle of the room like an island. There was no wall behind it, no cabinet below, just clean space. At first, it looked impressive, but the more I stood there, the more I realized something was missing. The flame had nothing to lean on. She said, "I wanted it open-airy, but now it just feels like the heat goes nowhere." And that stuck with me, because I could feel it too. Like all the effort, all the fire, was burning up into emptiness. No return, no root. It wasn't her work ethic. It wasn't her food. It was the energy, always rising, but never coming home. Fire shines, but earth holds. Without grounding, energy rises and disappears. The stove must not only burn, it must belong. Sometimes all it takes is a cloth, a scent, a whisper. And that's what we'll do next. A ritual to reset and anchor your fire. So what do you do when the fire keeps rising, but never stays? When the warmth is there, but the room still feels hollow? You don't fight the flame. You don't force it down. You just give it something to rest on. Because sometimes, even energy just needs to feel held. And the stove? It listens, not to noise, but to the way your hand chooses to return. You don't need to renovate. You don't need a new stove. You just need to return with presence, because fire listens, and what you say to it shapes what it gives back. Most people light the stove and move on. No pause, no breath, no contact. But in Feng Shui, what you ignore starts ignoring you. This ritual isn't about fixing the stove. It's about fixing your relationship to it. Step 1. Place your palm gently at the center of the stove, not to test heat, but to send your field into it. Why? Because the center of the stove is the energetic anchor. It connects all burners like the heart of a tree connects the branches. In Feng Shui, touch transfers intention. You're telling the stove, "I'm here, I'm aware. Let's begin together." You're grounding the fire through your presence. Step 2. Take a cloth, preferably cotton or linen. Start at the center and move outward in clockwise circles. Why clockwise? Because in both Eastern energy flow and sacred geometry, clockwise equals expansion and release. It moves energy outward into motion. As you wipe, imagine you're clearing static, old tension, fragments of stress from yesterday's meals. This is not about cleaning dirt. It's about resetting the chi spiral. You're turning chaos into rhythm. Step 3. After the wipe, pause. Don't light anything yet. Just whisper one word. Not a desire, but a vibration you want the fire to carry today. For example, steady, enough, rooted, safe. This is the word the fire will hold for you, because what you say at the start echoes through every action you take after. Why this ritual matters. Most people rush to the flame. They skip the hello. They skip the grounding. But a stove activated with awareness sends that energy into the meal, into your field, into your home. You're not just turning on heat. You're tuning a frequency. One that says, I am ready to hold what I call in. Energy doesn't respond to intensity. It responds to rhythm. When you ground the stove with intention and repetition, you stabilize your wealth signal. It's not about what's visible. It's about what vibrates beneath your hand and within your field. The first time I tried this, nothing felt different. But after a week, I noticed I was cooking slower, tasting more, wasting less, and somehow, money stopped feeling like it was slipping away. It didn't flood in. It just stayed, because even a grounded flame can be undone by something as simple as water flowing the wrong way. In the next video, we look at the one sink habit that quietly flushes abundance down the drain. So now, your stove has been touched, reset, held. The cloth moved in circles. The word whispered softly. The fire lit with presence, not pressure. And in that moment, you didn't just cook. You anchored energy. Something changes when the flame doesn't have to fight. It softens. It steadies. And suddenly, so do you. You might notice small things. Meals tasting better. Time slowing down. Money not rushing in, but no longer running out. Because when fire stops reaching and starts resting, abundance finds somewhere to land. If you felt something shift in your kitchen, comment below with the word fire grounded, so I know your flame is awake. And if this video stirred something, don't stop here. In the next video, we'll look at the one habit at your sink that quietly flushes wealth away without you even noticing.